Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
And a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human.
the latest in social science, psychology, and American culture.
And what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. I am super excited because we have here in the studio today Amy Rush, who I am just now meeting today, but I have known of you for quite a while and your work, so I'm super excited to meet you. Amy is a death doula and a medium who serves people here in the St. Louis area, and I'm not sure, maybe you serve people outside the St. Louis area too, but we can find that out.
I do.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me today.
welcome.
Before I go any farther, this is an honor.
Oh, well, we're so glad to have you. We're honored to
Yeah.
have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we are continuing our conversation about kind of women and witches and women in unconventional healing capacities. And so we're super excited to have Amy here to talk about the things that she does.
Yeah.
So Amy, just to start by kind of giving us a little background on you, like where do you live? Like what do you do? What do you, I mean, outside of the work you do as a death doula, like
Right, because
Yeah.
I have a whole complete life outside of that.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very full. I am an almost 50-year-old. I'm coming up on my big birthday. I'm so
Nice.
excited. Almost 50-year-old woman who lives in West St. Louis County, which is a very conventional place to live.
Yeah.
And I lead a very conventional life as a mom of 2 teenage boys, and I
Mhm.
drive them lots of places, and they're in sports and not in sports and have lots of friends, and we do all those things, and they
Yeah.
just eat a ton of food, so I'm always cooking.
Yep.
And then I'm married to a man who is a mechanical engineer with an MBA. So I have that grounding force
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
our home,
Yeah,
if
right.
you will. And then I'm out in the world as a death doula and a medium,
Nice.
kind of bridging life and death.
Soccer
Mm.
mom, death doula.
Right, totally.
I love it. I love it. So can you tell us just a little bit about first of all, what is a death doula? Let's start there. What some people might know what that means. Some people.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hadn't heard of it before until Kelley mentioned it. And then we just had a friend in from San Francisco, and she was like, oh, yeah, my other friend who's coming in town for this wedding, that's what she's studying to be. I'm like, how have I never heard of this? And then I'm hearing about it a lot.
Yeah,
So,
I love that. Once it pops in your field, watch
mhm.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll probably meet like 4 this
Yeah.
week. So I'm going to talk about the death doula role as I understand it, and as
Okay.
I embrace it,
Yeah.
because you could probably ask this question of any death doula and you'd get a different answer,
Sure.
right? Because it is a holistic role. It's an unconventional role in our culture.
Yeah.
The joke is that it's like one of the oldest roles
Yeah.
Yeah.
for humanity,
Yeah.
right? Because as long as we've been living, we've been dying.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we used to take care of each other in that, right?
Mhm.
And we were kind of all death doulas. We knew what to do. We knew how to tend to each other. We knew how to take care of each other, hold each other, walk each other home, as I like to call it.
Mm.
And we got away from that. But that's a whole rabbit hole I could go
Yeah,
down. The
well,
history of it is
We
fascinating.
could definitely go down that rabbit
Okay.
hole. Because I did a class on death and dying. And this was a few years ago. It was actually when COVID was happening, which was kind of the
Oh,
timing of it was
yeah.
very weird. But there was a book, or Nat Holloway maybe is the last name. But there was a series in the New York Times was about bringing death closer. And it was exactly what you were describing, but this whole kind of economic infrastructure that's removed us from the death experience. So, okay, someone goes to the hospital and then they are brought to a funeral home, and everything about the body is managed outside of the household.
So you don't ever have to see it.
Yeah, that.
Right,
Yeah. So it
right.
was really interesting to me.
Yeah, because if you think of the way we used to live, and it wasn't that long ago, right? It was at home, especially in the United States, on a farm,
Mhm.
on some sort of land that we probably had a relatively close relationship to. And I'm talking about like pre-industrialization, right?
Yeah.
And so when we were sick, our own people took care of us. When we died, our own people took care of us. We were laid out in our parlor rooms, and we were buried on our own land. And we had this very close connection with the life cycle that way.
Yeah.
It's said by historians that transition started happening around like, industrialization. The Civil War was a big force because for the first time ever, people were leaving home and going very far away to fight and whatnot, and then dying where they were.
Yeah.
And so the military, for one, had to figure out, okay, how do we get these loved ones' bodies back home?
Yeah.
So then embalming became a thing because there wasn't mass refrigeration on a Civil War field, right?
Right.
So chemicals came into play. People were dying away from home for that. Another big turning point was President Lincoln's assassination.
Yeah.
Did you hear about this part too?
No, you finish your thought, and then I'm going to build on something you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. So President Lincoln's assassination was a fascinating moment of cultural reckoning, because what happened was that, he was assassinated in Washington, D.C. and was to be buried in Springfield, Illinois. So they had to work with his body to preserve it such that it lasted the train trip back. Well, the train trip back was this enormous national production where thousands of people came out to see their dead president. And this train, it's quite fancy train, took a very long journey. I can't remember how many thousands of miles or hundreds of miles, whatever,
really
what have you. But I think it was like 2 to 3 weeks that they had to preserve this body. So what happens? The whole country comes out to see their dead president, who's embalmed. Oh, okay, I need to get embalmed. Oh, that's what we do now? That's in vogue. That's our culture. Okay. And so that's typically when it said embalming took off, right, as a thing. Which makes sense. I buy into that theory. So between like industrialization, moving away from that, and close connection to the land and to home, the Civil War and embalming, and then, the medical model taking root.
Before we jump into that, one thing I was going to add about the Civil War was, so like the Gettysburg Address was the consecration of a huge Civil War cemetery. That's what was the speech was, where it's like the laying the dead, right, to rest. And so that was a huge movement, was like, okay, all of a sudden there's like literally all these bodies everywhere. Like, what do we do with them? And how do we, and so then you have like these towns after a Civil War battle that are literally just trying to deal with the issue of like, they're going to rot in the sun, and we have to figure out how to manage this
in a hygienic way. So that there's not
right. And so, but to your point, like I hadn't really thought about all of those different factors of like the embalming of like, oh, now there's coverage of this, and now this is in vogue, and now it's like also we're creating these national cemeteries because we have to deal with the death of all these people away from home. And so you have all these different movements sort of happening, and they do shift the culture. So now then go to the medical side. My wife's a doctor too, so then that's another layer of right.
So that the medical model took root, right? And clinics were built, doctors' offices, hospitals. So when we got sick, we left home to seek treatment. And God loves science. It's great, right? And it worked for so long. We really have abolished a lot of acute diseases and what have you, acute afflictions that used to take our life back then. But then what happened is that we're left with like chronic conditions. And actually wrote my master's thesis on this, so I could go on and on. I don't want to take you too far off route, but we're left with chronic diseases. So then we're seeking treatment outside of home for chronic diseases, and that treatment goes on and on and on and on. And so then what happens? The treatment at some point doesn't work anymore, and it's time to die. And now where are we? We're outside of the home. We're away from home. Our life has become about a diagnosis, about a disease. and we're dying outside of the house, or we're dying inside the house, but nobody in the house knows what to do with it anymore. Right?
Because nobody, it's
Well,
not
'cause
a skill and not a,
We've been disconnected
right.
from it for so long that we all turn to each other clueless, which
Right.
which is really my apex point about how I became a death doula, right? Where my father was dying. My sister brought him home to her house. I helped her. The two of us took care of him for his last 2 weeks around the clock. And I saw firsthand, and I didn't do all this research I'm talking about until after the fact,
Yeah.
too, right? Because here I am tending to my dad in the most compassionate ways I could possibly muster. But at the same time, and we had every resource. She's an MD, right?
Yeah.
We have deep roots in community here, a lot of family. We had every resource. We had amazing hospice, health insurance, Medicare, blah, blah, blah. And still, like, what is going on? Why don't people know how to answer my questions? Like, why do I not feel supported? Who can I talk to just about dying and death? Like, I didn't have anybody to turn to with what I was going through who could understand and kind of hold my hand and shepherd me through the process. And so the second, actually, I know it precisely when it happened. When the crematorium came to pick him up, and they put him in the back of what looked like a minivan, and the door slammed shut on his body. And at that moment, I remember my entire body lighting up and thinking, I've got to become the person I wish I would have had these past 2 weeks at my side. And so I did a bunch of research. I channeled all my grief into the internet, and I tried to figure out what that was, because I wasn't going back to medical school. And at the same time, I knew the help I needed wasn't medical.
Yeah.
I thought about becoming a chaplain. I'm like, I'm by no means holy enough for that. And that's quite an extensive process as well. And again, there wasn't enough there for me. It just didn't resonate with me. Again, I wasn't going to become a hospice nurse because I wasn't going to go medical, or a social worker, because honestly, they were part of the same system that I was seeking answers from and couldn't find. And so I was trying to find this role that filled these holes.
Yeah.
And the closest thing I could find was the death doula role.
Yeah.
So to answer your question that you asked me probably 20 minutes ago at this point, I apologize.
No.
The death doula role, for me, as I understand it, is just a really holistic way to accompany people through dying and death, through the end of life phase, right? And what do I mean by holistic? I mean taking into account all that we are as humans, because we're so much more than our bodies. We're so much more than our diagnosis, our disease process, the morphine drip, the oxygen mask, the vitals. We're so much more than that. We're energetic beings. We're spiritual beings. We're social beings. I wanted to tend to the whole human. Not that I had all the answers or ever thought that I would or needed to, but maybe if I didn't know them, be able to help you find them, right? But if nothing else, just be a resource to show each other that, A, you're not alone in this. I have walked similar footsteps. I can help you walk these too. But also that, like, you can do this. If I did it and my sister did it and other people I knew did it, you can do it too. And I'm going to like help you have confidence and feel empowered to do it as well with what I know. So that's really how I landed on the death doula role and why I went with it and then hung a shingle doing it.
Yeah.
So you are really, and the term doula, people might not all know it. That's also what we call the women who accompany women through childbirth too.
Correct.
Yeah. Right. So
that other portal.
Yeah. So you're helping the person who is dying. You are there in service to them, but then you're also in service to the people who are the family who is there with them and helping them too.
Correct. So that's like one of the secrets of my role is that my clients, when I talk about them, most of the time really aren't the dying person.
Yeah.
Right? Like dying is a natural process.
Mhm,
Yeah.
And the
mhm.
body knows just what to do. And
Yeah.
if we give it the room and the space to do it and help it along, it's going to be fine. It's
Yeah.
really, I really end up tending more to the people in the room,
Yeah,
the loved
yeah.
ones who were
Yeah.
there, and freaking out that they're not doing enough or
Yeah.
the right things
Yeah.
or messing things up or making mistakes,
Mhm.
right? So I'm really the heavier lifting, and I don't, that's a bad term because it doesn't feel heavy to me, but I would
Right.
say the bulk of the service is really with the people around the dying
Mhm.
person.
Yeah. What I'm curious, and I'm sure this varies, but how, like, at what point will you join a family to start working with them? Like, I mean, days, could you be with somebody for a year if they know they're on that journey? Like, at what point?
Whatever point I'm contacted.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have worked with people who have no death on their radar
Mm.
to get them more comfortable with the idea of dying and death,
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
and to
Interesting.
dispel some fears and hangups and
Yeah.
fear-based thinking around it, right?
Yeah.
And then I've helped people in the 11th hour who,
Yeah.
until I met them in the 11th hour, were complete strangers to me, right?
Yeah.
So it really does run the entire spectrum. It's just when I'm contacted and what's needed, and then I just say yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So how different I actually don't know enough about hospice care, but like what are the maybe the big differences between what you're describing and like what someone would get if they were in hospice or having a family member in hospice?
Yeah. So all of my clients have been hospice patients
Mhm.
Okay.
because in our culture, in our medical system, that's where you land
Mhm.
Right.
when treatment doesn't work anymore, and it's time
Yeah.
to think differently
Yeah.
about what's next. So hospice is essentially part of our medical model of
Mhm.
care. It didn't used to be. It used to fall outside of it. In fact, the originators, some of whom are still alive and are writing about this and are giving podcasts about it,
Mhm.
founded hospice as a holistic modality
Mhm.
that sat outside of the medical model and really tended to the whole person. Well, guess
Mhm.
what? It worked.
Yeah.
And it felt really good to people,
Mhm.
and people wanted more of it. And the medical model realized what a great thing it was and how it served their patients
Mhm.
well and their families well, which also translated to dollars, if we're being
Mhm.
frank, right?
Right.
And so that service that was the hospice model became absorbed into the medical model.
Got it.
Not all hospices are as medical as others, right? There's a great one here in town who really lives true to the roots of the hospice model as it was first conceived. Many are very, very, very medical.
Mhm.
For the most part, they tend to be on that medical end because what's required? A doctor's referral.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So you have to have that MD sign off on your
Right.
patient chart and recommend hospice. And so that that vibration, that brand of service
Mhm.
just continues. You're
Mhm.
met with a nurse, you're
Right.
met with folks from the medical model,
Yeah.
really, who are doing the work of hospice.
Mhm.
Hospice does supplement in beautiful ways many times with social workers, with massage therapists, with sound healers, pet therapy. Those
Mhm.
things, they're not as common. They're
Mhm.
not as commonly found. For the most part, it's kind of medical
Mhm.
support at end of
Yeah.
life, which
Yeah.
we need. I want that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
please make sure there's a
Yeah.
handy box of comfort meds next to me.
Yeah.
When
Right.
I'm in my final days,
Right.
please, please make sure there's a nurse coming and checking in on me in a tender way,
Mhm.
Yes.
making sure I'm comfortable
Yeah.
and at ease, please. But to my point, there's just so much more going on in the room than that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because what I do then is support the dying and the loved ones beyond what hospice is doing.
Mhm.
Right, right.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
hospice is a piece of it.
Mhm.
I can I can wrap my arms around hospice and them and the whole thing.
Got it. Do your clients,
Mhm.
do they find you outside of then the hospice system, or are you like connected to the hospice system in any way? Like in terms of like, let's say the organization that you said does a good job. Are they like, hey, if you need additional resources, like this is someone you contact, or how does that work?
So that happens
Yeah, okay.
every now and then, if many hospice providers who are really with patients on a day-to-day basis know that they need more
Yeah.
than they're getting. Hospice professionals are some of my closest allies that way, because they know we humans need more too.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
they can only do so much in their jobs, right?
Right.
So oftentimes they will say, hey, I know this woman, or I know the death doula role. Would you be interested in talking to somebody who could maybe give you more support and explain things a different way and hold your hand in a different way than we can't? I have 8 other patients to see today.
Yeah, exactly.
She could come over and stay. Would that feel good to you?
Yeah.
So that does happen. For the most part, it's word of mouth. People I've helped then
Refer,
then turn to their friends and family who navigate similar situations and say, oh my gosh, you have to meet this person. She was so helpful to me. I don't know how I would have done it without her.
Yeah.
One thing that came to mind, though, when you were talking about working with people for whom death is not on the horizon, immediate horizon, but who are just have a fear of death, who contact you, I'm sure that the study in psychedelics has been used to help people through that like fear of death, and that's one of the big uses of it is for people who are in terminal diagnoses. I wonder if that is is that becoming part of the doula I don't know, landscape? That kind of work?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we're revisiting at this point
Yeah.
your question, like, what does a doula do?
Yeah.
Right? There are doulas that do everything all over the place in the
Yeah.
end of life landscape. And it's just so individual as to how we show up in the world. Like, I have a real passion for green burials and home funerals. And so I did extra work in that. So I love delivering like small group presentations on that, or classes, or walking loved ones through the decision-making process. Like, oh my God, I have my husband's ashes. What now?
Yeah.
Nothing feels good to me. I don't even understand what I'm supposed to do with this box. Like, they're frozen. And so I love walking people through those choices and those rights. We have so many choices and rights at end of life that we don't even know we have.
Yeah.
So really working.
Now you're saying RIGHTS, but
well,
also RITES, right? Yeah.
both.
Yeah.
Right. Which is another point
Yeah.
I'd like to make is that another big focus of mine is the spiritual part of dying and death. That's just where my soul sings to be in service. And so working with people to kind of be willing to just be in that space and engage with some of these ideas, and maybe seeking some RITES that feel good, right? And that give them a sense of control, purpose, love, comfort, peace, things we don't necessarily need to turn to a man in a collar to do for us, right? And I was raised Catholic. I get it. Some of those things still feel good to me too, but there are so many other things that we can do.
Yeah. And that need for ritual in that space, I think is so important. And whether you are religious or not, whether you are, believe in God, whether you're a theist or not, I think that psychologically, humans need ritual in order to move through grief or
right.
Absolutely.
And I view what's happening as spiritual, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is, or that's what you as the client would call it.
Right.
Yeah.
But every single person I have ever been in a room with around dying and death knows there's more going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
than
thin space,
just
right?
the body's cells shutting down.
Yeah.
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 And even if it's just sense making we help each other do around those changes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Call it whatever you want. Spirituality, ritual work, whatever.
Yeah.
It's so helpful and it's so healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a beauty. There's like,
Yeah.
I mean, I know dying is messy,
yeah.
like literally,
Well,
but it's also, there's a beauty.
Yeah, in that New York Times piece that I mentioned, that bringing death closer. So I'm curious if you ever had clients that have done this, but it was talking about the like having people that would do the laying of the body in the home parlor, essentially, like that the person would die at home and they would keep the body there for a few days while visitors came. And I don't know if they called them death doulas in the article. It was a long time ago when I read it, but maybe they had a different term at the time. But it was a person who would come and sort of help the family with this process of like preparing the body and like touching the body. And I remember just being really moved by this passage where this man was talking about how, like, every morning him and his wife would get up together and have coffee, and he would get up first and he would make the coffee. And she had died the day before, and he got up like he normally did and made the coffee, and then was like, oh, she's dead, right? And had that realization. But he was like, but she's still in the house, and so he could go and like sit with her body and still, have this like sense of, I don't know if closure is the right word, but like continuance towards closure almost. I almost like I feel emotional thinking about it.
Right. I mean, that's such a beautiful scene.
Yeah.
Right. And to the gift of time that he had to sit with what he had just navigated and what his future would look like too. And that inflection point and the gift of time he had to kind of process it in a different way. We don't do that.
I know.
They do come and take away your dad's body and put it in the back of a minivan, and you're supposed to just be fine. I don't know. That's so weird to me. Yeah. That's so weird.
I know. Well, so there's another anecdote from it. This was from the book, but I guess in South America, there was less, like, the capitalism came for the death first here in America, of course, right? And so South America, there was still this process of like more home funerals or like burials on like your property, or they would even do like pyres, right, and burn the body, but it would be like a ritual sort of thing. So I guess some of the government institutions were like, no, you can't do that, right? And so they started coming and like taking the bodies from the family to do the more institutional process. But really, there was also like sort of economic forces that were, and so there's this scene where this family, they sneak into the hospital and they steal the body back from like where it was taken, so that they could do their own rituals that they wanted. It was really a cool passage in that book.
I love them.
Yeah.
I would have been the first person to break through the door with
right,
and go to jail for them or pay their bail or whatever.
Right.
I love them.
Yeah.
I think who's the guy from The Office who wrote the book The Soul Boom?
Oh yeah, Rainn Wilson.
Rainn Wilson. I think in that book, I think he's in the religion that he was raised in, that he practices, they make a very big deal about taking care of the body. And I think he has a chapter where he talks about like when his dad died, like washing his, like the body and like just, and what that meant. Yeah. That hands-on. Yeah.
And there are spiritual, religious, cultural traditions around the globe from the beginning of time that speak to this.
Yes.
And many talk about the 3-day mark, which I always find fascinating. I've read a lot about it. I haven't been able to witness it in real life here in the United States. Can you even imagine anybody in our culture sitting with death for 3 days?
For 3 days.
We're not quite there yet.
Well, Shiva, right?
But
sitting Shiva.
Shiva.
But it's not with the body, right? Or
no. In fact, the body is buried pretty quickly in Jewish culture.
Right.
But
it's probably
then
the closest.
Shiva. Yeah.
It's probably the closest ritual we have to that 3-day mark.
Yeah.
So tell us more about the 3-day mark, or what transpires.
Well, I'll
over
try
this.
to. I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
But it's said to take that long or require that time for the soul to maybe separate from the body or this 3-dimensional material world. in a healthy way that it can then travel. That's like one of the theories,
Yeah.
but there are many, and it depends on what tradition you're speaking to, right? Or speaking about. There are many beliefs around that 3-day mark as being some sort of
it's
special
interesting.
point, if you will.
And then, in Christian culture, was it Jesus, like it was 3 days, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And which leads me to also, and we talked about this earlier in our introduction, but this idea of kind of this anointing of the dead, this taking care of burial, this was traditionally a woman's role, like a woman's gift, like that women typically brought. And so it's interesting that when you think about a mortician, and funeral directors,
Yeah.
you typically think of
Men.
men.
Yeah.
But in this resurgence of this, I think what I would call kind of a lineage to ancient practice, women are really the ones who are stepping into these roles. I wouldn't say probably, only, but probably predominantly. What does it mean to you to do this as a woman? Like, what do you feel like you bring to this space, this very thin space?
Oh, what do I bring to it as a woman?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I know it's a big question.
It's a really big question, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I think there's something so innately powerful about being the one who holds the womb
Mm-hmm.
and then also hold your hand
Mm-hmm.
as you're transitioning, right?
Yeah.
Like we do both portals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's really freaking magical.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, poor men miss out on this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We get to do both.
Yeah.
That's holy to
Yeah.
me, right? Like that's as holy as it gets
Yeah.
to be able to do both.
Yeah.
What a gift.
What a gift. We talked earlier before we got on about I have a tattoo of Kuan Yin, and you said you
Yes.
have a lot of Kuan Yins.
Yeah.
So this, I don't know if Erin, if
I
you
don't
know the
know
story
this,
of
yeah.
Kuan Yin, but Kuan Yin is kind of the goddess of compassion in Buddhism, and the story goes that her father tells her that she's going to marry this man, and she says no, she refuses, and so to punish her, he sends her to a nunnery. And she's forced to serve. She's forced to take care of things, clean things, do these things. And being a princess prior, who's never done any labor or work or anything, she's like, this is amazing. This feels great, like doing these things, like taking care of people. And so so he keeps coming by and he's like, are you ready to get married yet? She's like, no, I'm not. Absolutely not. This is amazing. And he was like, punish her further. And so it keeps happening that he keeps punishing her further and further until finally the lowest job that they can think to give her is to be in the room with all the dying nuns, to taking care of them and cleaning them, as they're sick, and then taking care of them as they die, and taking care of the bodies as they die. And that is like the step right before she kind of is then just silent on a mountain, kind of holding space for everybody for eternity. But in that space, like that is the ultimate gift, and that is the ultimate way to serve. So I don't know. I feel like it is just such a beautiful and needed and holy, sacred practice.
Yeah,
that
I
you
mean,
do.
I love her story so much
Mhm.
because I feel like I know it, right?
Yeah.
In what I do.
Yeah.
And so often I'll go to these, like I told you, my husband's basically a businessman, and we
Mhm.
go to these fundraisers and these dinners and things. And it is,
When people ask,
it's like-
what do you do?
it is like you could sell tickets to
Yeah.
our table because eventually it's like salad course. Somebody's like, so Amy, what do you do? Do you work
Yeah.
outside the home? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I do. But I have a very unconventional role. I'm a death doula. And I mean, you can hear the salad forks hit the plates, empty mouths fall open, people clutch their pearls.
Yeah,
Like, it's
amazing.
the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And I always just turn to my husband and I wink. I'm like, I know how to kill a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Um, And
I love it.
invariably, one of the first things out of mouths, once people can like regain their composure, is,
right.
oh my God, I could never do what you do.
Yeah.
Like,
Mm.
okay, you can,
Yeah.
and you did. You
Yeah.
used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
And
might
you
have
will
to.
again.
Yeah. Right.
You will again.
Right.
Trust me on that one.
Yeah.
We all are
We all-
born, we all die.
Yeah.
But we did,
Yeah.
and we need to again.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing about altruism is that it feeds the soul,
Mhm.
your own soul, in that
Yeah.
altruistic act, right?
Yeah.
And so it is the circle of life. It's that circle of love that's just, it's like, it's the best drug out there.
Yeah.
I mean, that to be in that space, you're just so in touch with it.
Yeah.
I get her. I get Kuan Yin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as a spiritual director, we say this too, like it's a ministry of mutuality where you're serving this other person, but you are just so served in response at the same time. Like you are, yeah. And it's got to be the same for your work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have this whole corporate background I came from, right, where I was a writer in marketing communications, and I had a book on Amazon, and I thought that was so cool, right? And it was great. And not to knock anybody who got a publishing deal and was on Amazon. Awesome, go for it. I'm so happy for you. But what I do now, like I can like barely talk about that anymore because it just almost doesn't even seem to matter when you sit in enough rooms with enough people who are dying.
Yeah.
I bet.
Like you're like, Amma, what? Like it doesn't. I don't know. Like my whole heart space has shifted in helping other people.
Yeah.
And that service is unlike anything else available to us as humans.
Yeah. It's so present. It's so like meaningfully, tangibly present. And no, I hear you. I mean, we all have to feed our families, right? So there's all kinds of different work that we have to do, but like the ability to be able to do work that does put you so intimately in touch with the here and now in real life, and not sort of this like amorphous technological space, which is just like so outside of human scale, and like that it's so hard to connect and feel that intense, I don't know, wholeness, emotionality that it's like really central to like being a human.
I know, and we're in competition so much now that way. Like I've been thinking a lot about how like my role is basically like the opposite of AI.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, oh, that's the Esther Perel. So do you listen to Esther Perel?
No, but I probably should.
You'll
love
her. So her whole thing is that the new AI, like not artificial intelligence, it's artificial intimacy. So her whole thing is like how do we navigate like the real relationships and like the messiness of real life, and that how in the 21st century loneliness is masked as hyperconnectivity. So we live in this like social media environment where I have 10,000 friends, but not one person who will feed my cat, and much less come and sit with me when I'm dying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yes. A resounding yes.
Yeah. You're the opposite of AI.
Amazing. And say more about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
let me think about what I would say about that. Because I don't mean to put myself or my role on a pedestal. I kind of feel I hesitate to do that.
We will do that for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I just am always reflecting on how noisy this world is with things like artificial intelligence and social media, like you were saying, an X number of followers, but I don't have somebody who can like, feed my cat, because I do have these teenage boys and I see the kind of world that they're frankly bombarded with on a day-to-day basis, and like trying to like ground some things for them in our home that can give them some best practices moving forward as they grow through this culture. And it's really weird, like we've normalized all this noise and we've normalized the disconnect, and like ooh, I think like we're in trouble with that.
Yeah,
Like,
big
and
time.
if we don't dial that back, I'm over here dialing it back and taking like a different route. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
it feels really dang
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
And any converts I can get to even like sit and have a conversation like
Yeah.
this, I say yes. Like I don't know if you noticed, but
Yeah.
like a woman like you calls me and says, okay, yeah, so we're talking to like female healer. I'm like, before you can even finish the question, I say yes.
Yeah.
And it's part of what I decided when I signed on to do this role. I made an agreement with the universe. I'm like, you ask me, I will say yes
Yeah.
over and over and over
I
again.
love that.
And people try it. It feels so good,
Mhm.
right? Because so much of the world is no,
Yeah.
and it doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so this is amazing. I want to also kind of move into the other role that you do sometimes, which is very connected to your role as a death doula, but you also work as a medium for people
Yes.
too. Can you tell us like what that entails? Like we probably have ideas in our head about what that looks like, but can you give us a little bit clearer understanding of that?
Sure. So again, I'm going to describe like the Amy Rush version of
Yeah.
mediumship,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
Because like there's a million
Yeah.
there are a million different ways to talk about being a medium too. So for me, it's connecting with the unseen. And whether you call that God, the divine source energy, spirit with a capital S, I used to call it that for a while. Then that kind of started to feel kind of hokey to me. So now I'm calling it source energy. I don't know. We'll see. Like I'm always shifting because I am always like, what is this?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I'm getting information that none of us should get, like should be able to access, but I can.
Yeah.
And if I can do it, I know anybody can do it. Trust me on that one. Because I know we are all connected. We just forgot. I just happened to like tune my little radio dial in a way that I was able to hear it and see it and feel it and smell it and all the things, right? So for me, it's a connection to the unseen is probably the closest way I can describe it.
And was it something that you discovered or something that you were taught or you sought out or
I have experienced this connection my entire life.
Really?
My entire life since my earliest memory, which was like around 3. And then growing up, I would always know like when people were going to die, that they did die. I didn't have to be told. I knew how everybody in a room felt, what they were thinking. And part of that is like, you could say, oh, I was an empath, but it went like beyond that, right? Like I knew data. I knew like things that you wouldn't otherwise know. I would see and experience dead people in the room, like movie Sixth Sense, or along those lines. But when
did you pay attention to this?
Well, yes, but then you don't when it's not like appreciated readily or in your home or shaped. Not that I wasn't appreciated. I don't want to say that, but like when your own family doesn't have a framework for it, or like you float some ideas out about what's happening to you, or like, oh, I saw grandpa who's been dead X number of years. Like, people don't have, my own family and friends or whatever, the culture didn't have the tools to like mirror back to me like goodness about that and how to use that and what to do with it and how to channel it. And so I really kind of kept it to myself. And then the older I got, the more useful I found it in navigating the world. And then I will say too, my dad's death was also an initiation into channeling that ability for other people's benefit. Because I was experiencing things during his crossing that he would then affirm to me. And he was, for the most part, non-communicative, like in a state such that he couldn't communicate. But then when he did, he was telling me things that I had also just seen or felt or experienced, right? And I'm like, oh, I knew this was freaking real. I knew this was real for 40-something years. And this is proof. And dang it, I'm going to tell people about it because it brought me so much peace and comfort in the lowest, darkest, most anguish-filled time of my life to know that I had these connections and that we don't die, that something about us, a lot about us continues, right, was so comforting to me. It was part of my healing. It was part of the alleviation of grief. And so who am I to not share that ability to help other people benefit too?
Yeah.
Right. So it was really, again, death, my own dad's death, that was my initiation to hanging this
To
shingle
kind of
as
owning
well.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Hanging the shingle.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that phrase.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when people come to you
Mm-hmm.
for mediumship, what are they're looking to kind of communicate with somebody who's passed?
I mean, that's the assumption I make.
Yeah.
And that's, the write-up on my website talks about
Yeah.
that, right,
Yeah.
as being the possibility. But I do not ask who they want to speak to, how long they've been dead, what they died from. I really prefer to go in as cold as possible
Yeah.
because the evidence I'm able to share then I feel like is that much more credible. Right.
Yeah.
Like I know it's real. I know I'm not pulling your leg. I mean, that would be so sick. Right.
Right.
To like
Yeah.
hold appointments and like
Yeah.
fudge these things or
Right.
whatever. That would be like sociopath stuff. And so I prefer to know nothing. They come to me seeking connection and I give it to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm able to usually tell people how their loved ones pass because I'm made to experience it. So I'll know if it was a lung issue that I'll have trouble breathing, marked trouble breathing. I'll know it's a heart issue by heart flutters or pains to my chest. Throat cancer will cut off my voice. Aneurysms, I'll feel where they got them in my brain and be able to point to that exact space where maybe they had an aneurysm or they had a tumor or something like that. So I'll give you that. I'll be able to give you that kind of evidence if it's sought. Sometimes I walk a fine line with that because I'll tell people too, I don't want to re-traumatize you. I'm not here to like make you experience how your loved one's dying. I'm just sharing it as evidence. So you know that I have your person with you right here. I'm able to talk to them about memories from their childhood that nobody else would know about, right? Or memories from vacations that they've never shared, or maybe recall a picture. For some reason I get these images that are oftentimes photos that they have framed in their homes, which I think is so cool because I've never been in their home.
Right.
How would I know, right? But then I'm able to describe in exacting detail what that picture is of, right? And so I'm able to give them this affirmation that our love, something about us goes on and on and on. And not only that, but it's still with you, the living person, helping you, guiding you, accompanying you, trying to steer you on certain paths, giving you signs to pull your attention this way or that, right? Like, I don't know. That to me, when I received that gift, was such a tremendous gift in healing that I just want to be able to do it for as many people as possible.
Do you find that there are people who maybe are like skeptics around it, but then when they experience a death of a loved one, they like, I don't know whether they let their skepticism go or they're just like, I don't care if they're just like, I need connection. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, are people more able to kind of let their skepticism of that go when it becomes a need? And I don't mean that it's
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think when things do become any reality for any of us, right?
Yeah.
It makes it that much more apparent in our field.
Yeah.
It's something we sit with. So yes, skeptics are fun. I get them all the time, and I'm always able to give them like a handful of things that I know resonate, whether or not they share that with me, is one thing. But the tricky thing about working with skeptics too is that their skepticism, their resistance blocks
Yeah.
what also could be coming through for them.
Yeah.
Right? Like that skepticism and doubt is a vibration that is much lower
Mm-hmm.
than the vibration I'm hooked into
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
with this source energy. And so they're pulling their own appointment down.
Yeah.
I can't say that because
Yeah.
I would never want to like guilt anybody or shame anybody about where they
Right.
are, maybe with their grief
Right.
or with their healthy skepticism of me. But it is harder work
Yeah.
for me to like overcome that.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just takes like one tiny piece of information
Yeah.
that's shared with them, that's affirming from them, that you can like literally see their heart just like crack open. And they're like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
this is real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
I have a friend who passed a few years ago, and his mother and I are very close. And it's interesting because she received messages from mediums who she had not even sought out.
Oh,
Who had
okay. That's a
Yeah.
little bit weird.
no, I mean,
I'm
like,
not-
there weren't even like necessarily mediums. They were like friends who
Okay.
like friends of friends who just kind of were like, oh, like your friend who died, like I had an experience of
Okay.
him, and they would write something out and then just send it to her. No,
Okay, that
you
makes
know.
me feel better.
Yeah.
I thought they were practicing mediums who like contacted
No, no,
her
no, no.
because I'm very like
no.
this
no,
is
no.
a hang up of mine. I'm very like permission based,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so I don't just like walk through Costco telling you like
yeah, right.
telling
right.
strangers what dead people are also
Right.
walking with them.
right?
Because that's weird, and who knows? Like, you just that's so
Yeah.
unfair and
Yeah.
But is that like
unkind.
actually something that happens to you?
It could if I wanted it to.
Yeah.
I'm not turned on at Costco because I couldn't get through Costco.
Right.
If I also was aware of
Yeah.
every
Source of
every other energy
yeah,
Yeah.
in the building, right?
Yeah.
Imagine. I mean, I would probably not leave without
yeah,
a seizure or
Yeah.
like a medical event.
right, right.
So no, I don't. I don't turn on at Costco.
yeah. I love that turn on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Erin, do you have any questions around this?
I guess I mean,
You have a healthy skepticism.
I'm more would be more in the skeptic category, but the thing that I'm thinking about, I've been thinking a lot about complexity theory lately, and ultimately it's like the scientific theory of like connection and how everything is connected.
Right.
And so there was just moments of things that when you were just sort of describing like, that you're connected to everything that has come before and everything that will come after.
Mhm.
And like there is science to support that,
Yeah.
and so but yeah, I mean, I think when I listen to you, I mean, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, caring for other people and like helping them walk through a journey that is like emotionally like fulfilling for them is a wonderful thing. That's where I would like land
Mhm.
on any of it. But I mean, I think that there are parts that I can see like how those connections sort of manifest, or how that like I do sort of believe in there is at some level, right there, that we're all just like energy that is connected.
Mhm.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I'm connected to in mediumship, right?
Yeah.
Like call it the knowing field or the quantum field or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can take like a scientific term
Mhm.
about it. You could take a spiritual term about it, a religious term about it. It's all getting at that same idea.
Yeah.
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 Well, and like you just used like the quantum term, like quantum field, right? Like there is science to
That's what
back
complexity
up.
theory gets into.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even just the idea of like what you were saying earlier about like, this isn't it, like energy goes on. Like we know that in nature, like
Yeah.
100%.
as and to me, anything in kind of spiritual practice that isn't somehow mirrored in nature and science
Right.
feels false to me. But when we can see those theories kind of moving, I feel like, okay, That makes sense.
Yeah. And that's what I find, like for me, my skepticism especially comes around like more like structured religious traditions where it's like, well, this is what you must believe. And this is what
Dogma.
yeah. And so I'm more open to like that sort of
a little woo woo. There's
yeah.
a little woo woo in your life.
Well, yeah, like
Erin.
it's like if you're gonna base it in like naturalistic natural principles, and I'm more on board.
Yeah, yeah.
And isn't it interesting too to revisit that idea of plant medicine that
Yes,
natural substances are helping people connect
Yeah.
readily and availably, helping people connect now with
Yeah.
this knowing field, with this quantum
Yeah.
field, with source energy.
Yeah,
right?
and when you say plant medicine, you're talking like psychedelics. And,
right. And that's another thing that's really cool to me is to watch religious theory and spiritual theory and cultural traditions and science and we're all kind of reaching the same conclusions.
Yeah. What did you say earlier before you said all of us witches?
Oh yeah. So yeah, that my witch theory.
Yeah.
Okay. So that like you and I and the three of us, I'm sure we're like witches in some cave back wherever.
Yeah.
We're just kind of like re-meeting now.
Yeah.
And that's why I just say yes.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm like, oh my, right. Sure. Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh my God. So fun to see you. It's 2024.
Yes. So
Look,
fun
we're
to see
sitting
you.
off a park and just talking into microphones. Isn't this silly?
It's silly when we were last in the cave, like with our little pestles,
right,
you know,
like awaiting, you know, our being burned at the stake or something.
Right.
And it's so fun to be together again, like laughing. Right?
Yeah.
Like I think that's a lot of what's going on. I think like, it's like that witch is rising and enough stuff got pinged in the quantum field that we all kind of like felt the call, right?
Yeah.
And you know,
I love it.
It's all shaking out.
So there's I haven't told Erin this. So there's a retreat that I'm going to this summer for spiritual directors. And there's an organization called Ligari. I met this priest a couple of years ago. Yeah, well, actually, it was last summer. Met this priest who was part of the Johns Hopkins study on psychedelics and spirituality.
Okay.
So they were looking for clergy who had never partaken of plant medicine before, but who were willing to, which you could imagine there would be few. Right?
Well, I think there'd be a lot.
Well, well, maybe, but I mean, most of the ones who I think are willing to do it probably have done it before.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he participated. I think it was about 7 years ago, and it changed his life. And so he started this organization called Ligari, which is Center for Christianity and Psychedelics, and so it's specifically kind of a Christian organization. And he really believes that the future of spiritual direction, the future of spiritual practice is going to include this, and that so it's a retreat for spiritual directors to start kind of learning how to train in using psychedelics as part of their practice.
Again, like what a beautiful merger,
right,
of different understandings, traditions, theories, all kind of reaching that same conclusion.
Yeah. But we would definitely be burned at the stake if it was a couple hundred years
100%.
ago.
Well, I wonder too about, I've been thinking about, because a friend of mine, actually he just got an journal article accepted to Nature, and his research is around psychedelics and like neural networks. And we should call him, actually. We should have him on the show sometime. But one of the things I've been wondering about, and this goes back to your point you made earlier about noise. And it's like, I wonder how much of that, like, I think one of the benefits of using psychedelics is that it like quiets the noise.
Yeah.
And it like opens then because the noise is quieter, your consciousness is more open to other pathways, maybe. You know?
Yeah, that's all I do when I connect. I just trained myself to quiet the noise enough that I could hear the quantum field, the knowing field, the source energy, whatever it is that you want to call it. That's all that is. Yeah.
Is meditation something that is really necessary for you to kind of move into that space?
No.
Really?
I mean, no,
That's
because
so funny.
I know. And
you're like, no.
A lot of
meditate.
mediums and mentors, and they all say you have to. Oh my God. Do you know how busy I am with like these kids and going to Costco and the husband who's never home? Like, I'm not sitting there like in some like, I don't know, cross-legged pose straightening my chakras every day
Yeah.
and like,
Yeah.
leaving
Oh
the
my
planet.
God. You're amazing.
I don't even have time to do that, much
Yeah.
less the desire. And also, speaking of menopause, I'm so achy. I can't even barely like cross my legs
Yeah.
anymore. No, you don't even have to try that hard.
Yeah.
To
quiet the noise.
You don't. I mean,
Yeah.
meditation is one path, and it's a
Mhm.
beautiful path, and it absolutely works. For some of us, it works easier than others.
Yeah.
Maybe just, I don't know, whatever. But it's not required.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
That's great. That's good for people to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to go into a big.
Whatever it takes for you to quiet the noise.
Yeah.
I like, I sometimes call it prayer.
Mm-hmm.
There's a favorite chapel of mine that I'll go into to get really quiet. And I'm not there for Jesus, but it's and Mary, but it's cool that it's about Mary and Jesus because it's nice and quiet, right? And so it's like it's really just about the quieting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes just a breath, right?
The
Just-
breath. I
yeah.
always say that. It's a breath away, it's a blink away. It's right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Amy, this was like amazing.
That was really fun.
This is really fun to
Oh,
learn
I'm so glad you
about.
thought so.
Yeah.
Because I know
Yeah.
I could sit here and just like talk all night.
Well,
Yeah.
we love
Yeah.
it. So could we. Are you an Enneagram 7, by the way? Do you know what? Do you an
Oh my
Enneagram
God.
person?
Okay. I told you I forget everything. I cannot remember what I am. I have done it and I can't remember.
I'm kind of thinking you're a 7.
Yeah, you might be.
We're
I'll
both
have to-
7s.
Okay. I'll look up my notes.
And
let you
actually,
know.
all 3 of us are 7s.
Oh,
We'll see.
shoot, I'm probably a 7.
I think you might be. I think you might join the club.
The 7 witches.
Yeah, the 7 witches. There we
Witches
go.
7. That'll be our coven name.
That's awesome.
You are amazing. And we want to make sure that anybody who's listening knows how to find you if they want to request your services. So can you tell people how to get a hold of you?
Yes, I would love for people to find me. My website is inspireddying.com. The 2 words, inspireddying.com. And there you can find links to my Instagram. I've got a blog I just restarted. You can sign up for my newsletter and then also email me. So that's where I am.
Great. And we'll put that link in our show notes as well. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. This was a true pleasure. I could go on and on and on.
Well, we
It's
might
a
have to
real
have you
treat.
back.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Get your topics ready.
Okay. As always, thank you for listening. Our listener base is growing every month, and that's because of all of you. Please, if you haven't done so yet, make sure you share this episode with a friend.
If you have any topic suggestions, questions, or thoughts on the show, feel free to write us at atheist@stlpodcast.com.
Atheist is produced by Justin Seiwell and Trend Media STL. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at STL Podcasts.
Thank you for listening, and keep looking for connection.